Hello and welcome a new video, ex-racist people of Reddit, what changed your views? Don't forget subscribe. I live in an overall racist country. Natives from here think we are not that racist, but sometimes it's just, wow. My family also didn't help. Comments about Black, Latino and Romani people were constantly made, and I also got some of that racism inside me when growing up. My depression made me change in some ways, and I guess that's one way it changed me. I was in bed at 4 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, so my brain thought it was nice hour to think about these things for some reason, and I started asking to myself why. Why do I consider myself better than a Black person or a Latino person or a Romani person? Why am I better than any of them? Why are they less than me? And also what? What makes me good and what makes them bad? What do I get from all of this? What do we get from all of this? I guess the answers were simple. Also with therapy I learned that making you feel better by making others feel worse isn't a good antidepressant and that it's indeed an asshole move. No matter how far through this thread I read, there seems to be one major pattern. My parents/family were racist, and then I spent time with people of other ethnicities. It really proves that prejudice is just fear of something you don't easily recognize, and once a person actually learns a bit about them, it's much easier for them to accept it. It's a shame that when some people come across new cultures or tradition, their initial reaction is to reject it as it's not the normal they know. Life really is just a big mix of shared experience. We don't have time to make judgments based on race. This thread makes me extremely uncomfortable. It's mainly white people realizing minorities, especially Black people, are humans too. It's positive, but just makes me realize there's a lot of racist people out there who view minorities as subhuman cause of their stupid upbringing and ignorant way of thinking. Grew up with a racist stepdad, and although I never actually felt hate towards anyone, I would laugh at and repeat the jokes. Until I was kicked out at 18, I had only met a Mexican family, my adopted neighborhood family, and a Black guy I was friends with from school. They also made the jokes about their race and laughed along depending on the crowd. Wasn't till I got older that they were doing that to fit in and could have been living somewhat in fear. After being kicked out, I moved around a few times before finding a job working with developmentally disabled adults. I was hired as the white guy. The company and all the workers were all born in Africa and moved to the US. It was a cultural shock at first, but they immediately became family. They taught me how to cook, how to treat others, and their culture. They even made sure to teach me how they were treated in public by citizens and police. Since then I haven't made or laughed at a single racist joke. I've made sure to look at everyone the same way no matter, and I've made sure to try and help others understand how their actions may not be racist, but they can still be hurtful. I've met so many beautiful people that I wouldn't have had the chance to talk to had I followed that influence growing up. If anyone who has any racist thoughts and is reading this, please just sit down and have a meal with someone. You'll be surprised how much you have in common while also having such different lives. Not me, but my best friend's parents. They told her not to touch me because she would get my skin disease. I'm a brownie, and at the time we met I was 12. They didn't want us to be friends, but I would always be kind and polite to them, full well knowing how they felt about my skin color. One year my friend, at this point best friend, was having a sleepover birthday party and her parents said I could come, but couldn't sleep over. My friend canceled her party and her parents must have felt like complete shit because they started to talk to me more and more after that. We have been best friends for almost 30 years now. Her parents came to my wedding. They send me a Christmas card every year. They call me and ask how I'm doing, and they invite me to their get-togethers. I'm glad they came around and am proud of them. I grew up in a white bubble, white neighborhood, white schools, white friends. I wasn't hate-filled or anything towards other races, just a bit nervous due to zero experience. I heard a lot of racial epithets, but didn't say them myself. Going to college, I met many people of many different races, and found most of them were good people. I discovered that the same 10% asshole to 90% good people I found among white people at my high school translated to college as well. The assholes were not grouped in a particular minority, but pretty universally scattered. Mom was surprised when I brought home a girlfriend from college who wasn't white. Mom asked why I didn't tell her in advance, but I didn't think it was important. I married that girl a few years later. My dad would make disparaging remarks about Black people, Mexicans, Chinese people, etc. when I was a kid. I remember repeating those same sentiments and no one ever corrected me. In first grade, we were all assigned pen pals from a school in another city, and mine was a Black girl named Chardonnay. I thought she had a weird name and I was disappointed when I found out she wasn't white. Very soon after that, We learned some very basic info about the civil rights movement during Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, separate water fountains, segregated schools, stuff like that. After that, I felt really bad about being racist and wanting a different pen pal, and really ashamed of my dad and grandparents for thinking that way. And I was so mad that they'd taught me to think that way. After that, I was really happy to have the opportunity to write to my pen pal and get to know her better. I'm so thankful that my school started teaching us about racism early on. It's scary to think how I could have ended up if those sentiments had gone unchecked. My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything, though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid and discovered she still loved him. She made astounding late life progress, accepting that darker skin-toned people were not only people, but family, friends, and welcome in her house. Man, I don't even know where to start with this one. I grew up in the middle of fucking nowhere, Mississippi, where the slave trade was referred to as the Great African Migration in our history books. Every person of color was referred to by the N-word as just the default. It wasn't until I moved the fuck out of the South that I began to comprehend what racism was. I wish I could say I had a moment of clarity that washed away all the racist bullshit that I'd grown up with, but it was more like a couple decades worth of mental deprogramming I had to fight against. There was so much underlying hate of different people that warped how my view of the world was. I didn't realize I was racist and being raised in a racist household until 4th grade. I was in a group project having to give a presentation to the class. My group was me and 2 black girls. My parents hated black women, black people in general, but especially black women. As they both watched tennis, you can guess all the shit they said about the Williams sisters. Meanwhile, there I was standing there watching my group mates talk. They were just as good, if not better than me, at talking in the class, or understanding the material, or anything really. I can still see that moment where the class fades away in my mind and one of my group mates is talking to the class where I realize a fundamental truth. My parents were wrong. It still makes me sad thinking about stuff I remember saying as a kid, regurgitating things I heard my parents or relatives say. But in my experience, as I have gotten older, is that the number one way to combat racism is to bring people into the same room. When people have shared experiences, that sense of otherness fades away. Of course, in 2021 and the internet bring what it is, it's really easy for people to hide in their own corners of the internet. But I'm thankful for that experience in 4th grade. I got in trouble a lot over the years for getting mad when family would throw around the N-word or lock their doors when they saw black people. But I knew I was right. And in the decades that have passed, nothing has tarnished or taken away that childhood lesson. Not me, but my grandpa told me that when he was young he was a bit racist due to his a-hole alcoholic dad being really racist and teaching him to treat others of different races like trash. He told me this stopped though when he was around 13 when his dad left. He realized how stupid it was to judge others based on race, and I'm glad he realized how stupid it was since he's a really sweet guy now. When I was wounded in Iraq, 2 white guys stepped over me. One literally stepped on my back to get themselves to a safer place. A black guy picked me up like I was a child, carried me to safety, and held my hand until a medic got there. My grandpa said he gained a lifetime of respect for black people after WW2 because they were the most fearless, focused, and professional people he had ever seen. Conversely, he hated Orientals for the rest of his life because of his experience fighting the Japanese. His plane was shot down over the Pacific and he was tortured by the Japanese before being rescued by the Navy. I tried to explain to him multiple times that 1, not all Asians are Japanese, and 2, not all Japanese people were bad in the first place, but he never came around. Left the church and my conservative family. Started examining myself closely. The really tricky thing about being a racist is that you never think you're a racist at the time. In the moment you feel like you're just quoting statistics or calling it how it is, etc. It takes a lot of work to actually stop, look at yourself, and then dig that ugly racist worm out of your heart. I grew up in a very small town in Iowa. Couple of hundred people, all white. So I guess I was raised not to discriminate against people that were different from me because we were all the same. Once I got older and moved to the city, oh yeah, racism is alive and well in Iowa. I didn't fall into that trap. I didn't understand it. Ended up in Alabama. My best friend was black. We just had the same sense of humor and liked the same things. I credit him with my kids being non-racist. He would crack jokes about racial things and they would be shocked. As they got older, they just rolled their eyes. Funniest thing was one of my daughter's date shows up and he opens the door and introduced himself as her dad. He moved to Michigan. I missed Charles. My dad was a neo-Nazi and raised me to believe anyone who wasn't purely white is inferior. I lived in a very rural area and never met anyone who wasn't white, so I never had any reason to think he wasn't right. As I grew up, my town diversified and gained a lot of people who weren't white. I got to be friends with a lot of them and met their parents and realized my dad was absolutely full of shit. As I've grown, I've realized he's the most toxic individual I've ever met, for way more reasons than this, and have completely cut him out of my life. I'm still pretty uneasy about it at times, but I know it's for the better. I still get called out as a racist every once in a while, and I guess it's pretty deserved due to my upbringing and actions therefore. But I like to think I've drastically changed for the better, and even though I catch myself falling back sometimes, I like to think I'm decently open-minded and definitely not stupid enough to think someone's skin color defines their character. I had a really bad roommate who was a recent immigrant from a specific country, and he was the only person from that country I had yet met. After moving out, when I'd meet people from that country, I'd notice myself thinking derogatory things about them for no reason. Getting to know a wider variety of people helped, and therapy, CBT, helped, but I still occasionally slip into old habits. It gets easier every day, but it takes work every day. Grew up in a small conservative religious town which is not only racist but very bigoted towards anything different. Always went along with the whole mindset of, well, if so and so race doesn't like it they can leave, and definitely used the N-word in jokes and stuff like that. Even used brown paint as blackface to paint another white classmate for a school project one time. Started dating girls from the city who started to open up my perspective to other ways of seeing the world in regards to not only race but sexuality as well, not just the conservative point of views I was raised with. I started to pivot my ways of thinking and challenged people on things I was taught previously but never still really considered myself as having been racist. It honestly took till about a week after the George Floyd and I was sitting down and reflecting on it, and it really hit me as to how racist and bigoted I had been in the past. I ended up personally calling myself out on shit I had done in the past and made a vow that I needed to start working to be a better person overall.